The Kings are in a really weird spot. They've got an old core filled with former All-Stars, an MVP, and loads of talent. Yet, due to a few obvious limitations with the roster, it feels like they're clinging on to playoff hopes while potentially sacrificing a future. So what can we expect from them in 2026? Are they good enough to compete in the West, and what can we make of their future? Last season for the Kings was pretty eventful. After starting 13-18, they fired head coach Mike Brown in late December. Then a little over a month later, they traded De'Aaron Fox in a 3-team deal that landed them Zach LaVine. The pairing of LaVine and DeRozan had many labeling them as a 2.0 version of the Bulls. But the difference was that they already had a proven offensive system in place with the way they run everything through Sabonis as a hub in the middle of the floor and emphasize speed and movement. So they ended up being a pretty strong offense right away. LaVine's elite transition scoring fit right in with the pace, and he provided a much needed presence as a three-point shooter in the half court. Then without Fox, they leaned into Malik Monk as a full-time point guard, running lots of two-man game with Sabonis, and when they absolutely needed a bucket, that's when they'd often turn to DeMar for an isolation. With that said, they were still a flawed offense for a few reasons. Firstly, the system hadn't really evolved since 2023, so a lot of what they did lacked variety, making them predictable. With that, they didn't have the best playmaking talent in the world, with both of their go-to scorers struggling with tunnel vision at times. The shot diet was the biggest problem though, as they didn't really generate many shots at the rim in the half court while also being a well below average three-point shooting team. So instead of being a top offense, they were in the back half of the top 10, which was a problem because they leaned all the way into the offense. And with a bottom 10 defense, they weren't even able to break 500. That bottom 10 defense had a few bright spots. Keegan Murray's turned into a great defensive wing, and he's a solid primary matchup for most stars around the league, while Keon Ellis also had some great minutes as a defensive guard. As a team, they were a pretty good transition defense that cleaned the glass, so at the very least, offenses weren't getting the easy stuff. Besides that though, with Sabonis and Valanciunas in the middle, they had no vertical presence, and their best players were pretty much all offensively slanted, often relying on lineups consisting of Monk, LaVine, and DeRozan to contain dribble penetration. In simpler terms, they couldn't protect the rim, and they couldn't defend the three-point line, so teams got whatever they wanted in the half court. Well, this is a serious problem because Keegan Murray's going to be out for at least the first month of the season. Before we get into that, I want to give a huge shout out to Factor for sponsoring this video because this 31-day series wouldn't be possible without them. Between the time it takes to research each team and produce these videos while balancing my personal life, I just don't have time to cook for myself. With Factor, in just a matter of 2 minutes, I can get a fully prepared meal on the table without worrying about preparation, cooking, or cleaning up. Just simply unbox, heat it up, and enjoy. The meals are fresh, never frozen, and there's a ton of variety. Recently, they've doubled the size of their menu to 80 plus rotating weekly meals. So whether you're craving a steak, a chicken breast, a calorie smart or vegan option, Factor's got you covered. For me personally, it's bulk season, so I've been loving their protein plus options. And eating clean has never been easier for me since signing up for Factor, which is why I'm super excited to bring you guys a special offer. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code HoopVenueFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. You heard that right, that's code HoopVenueFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for a year. It's hard to overstate just how much Keegan Murray's expected to do for them on defense. Not only is he basically the only guy who can match up with star wings and forwards, he's their best isolation defender, their best screen navigator, their best help defender, and the team's only secondary rim protector. So by taking him out of the lineup, they're essentially losing the entire foundation of their defense. Like I said, Keon Ellis brings value through his agility, length, and ability to make plays on the ball, but as a result of a very skinny frame, he's really only effective in individual matchups against guards or less physical creators. That's a problem with this Kings roster across the board. Devin Carter's going into year 2 and had awesome defensive flashes as a rookie. While he's strong, lengthy, and athletic for his position, he's still only listed at 6'2". Over the summer, they brought in Dennis Schroeder, a solid defender who can pressure the ball yet lacks the frame to match up with anybody but opposing guards. Earlier today, they also brought in Russell Westbrook, and I'll give him credit because he has shown the ability to guard up against wings, match their physicality, and hold his own one-on-one, while providing some of what the other guys have in terms of pressure, length, and athleticism. Also, in the 2025 draft, they landed 23-year-old Neek Clifford. He looks like he can be an impact defender from day one. He's 6'6" with a 6'10" wingspan, moves really well laterally, and has the frame to match up with physical NBA wings. Then when he's away from the ball, he's got great instincts as a helper, can clog up passing lanes, grabs a ton of rebounds, just the type of do-it-all defensive wing that can really make a difference. And long term, I actually think him and Keegan could be a really strong duo on that end of the floor. The question is how much of this, if any, translates into one cohesive lineup right now. Because while they have a bunch of capable defensive guards and some decent wing play, at most we're going to see one or two on the court at the same time, and they're almost always going to be surrounded by weak links. Think about how many minutes all three of Malik Monk, Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan are going to be playing. Even when Keegan Murray's healthy, they simply don't have the roster configuration to field out strong defensive lineups. They're going to really struggle to contain dribble penetration just like they did last year, and then they lack any semblance of verticality in the front court. Between Sabonis, Dario Saric, and rookie Maxime Reynaud, we're talking about three bigs who are basically allergic to blocking shots. They also brought in Drew Eubanks, who's limited in his own right, so the only true rim protector on the team is rookie Dylan Cardwell, who's on a two-way contract, hasn't shown any indication of NBA-level offensive play whatsoever, and would only get spot minutes behind Sabonis anyways. So while they brought in some solid defensive pieces, I really don't expect anything to change. In theory, adding more defenders to a team should make them a better defense. It almost sounds absurd to suggest otherwise. And while that difference could be felt in specific moments, as the backcourt should always have some sort of resistance, between Murray's injury and the clear limitations they still have across the board, I just don't think it moves the needle. Once again, they'll be leaning all the way into the offense, which shouldn't have much trouble picking up right where it left off. I mentioned that two of their flaws last season were a lack of rim pressure and the fact that they didn't have the best playmaking talent on the perimeter. Even a 37-year-old Westbrook's gonna get downhill and create good opportunities for the guys around him. Dennis Schroeder can also get into the defense, score in a few different ways, and get others involved. However, neither of these guys are great three-point shooters. In fact, sometimes defenses actively want them to take threes. The same goes for second-year guard Devin Carter. He only played 36 games at 11 minutes apiece, so take these numbers with a grain of salt. But his shooting indicators were a complete disaster, ranking among the very worst in the league from mid-range, three, and the free throw line. His athleticism is really impressive, and it helps him get 2 feet in the paint consistently where he can finish, draw fouls, or make plays for others. As long as the jumper remains a weak point though, he's not going to fit into a lot of lineups, and that's a real limitation with this team because it feels like they're going to have to choose between shooting and spacing or slashing and playmaking. Keon Ellis has shown for years now that he's a genuinely awesome shooter, hitting over 40% of his threes when left open, off the catch, and even off the dribble. However, that's pretty much the extent of his offense, not really handling the ball, pressuring defenses inside the arc, or creating for others. It's a similar thing with Keegan Murray. I'm not entirely sure what to make of the three-point shot right now because of how up and down it is, but since entering the league, his indicators as a spot-up guy look pretty good, hitting catch-and-shoot threes at volume. At the very least, he spaces the floor, and occasionally you'll get a nice backdoor cut or an offensive rebound, but again, we're talking about somebody who basically never handles the ball or creates. This is where rookie Neat Clifford's a little bit different. His translation to the NBA as a shooter remains to be seen, but there's something there, and he's got some potential as an on-ball creator. He's got a decent handle, knows how to use his size and length around the basket on drives, has a legitimate mid-range game, and most importantly, has the vision and passing ability to create for others. I'm not saying he's got lead creator or number one flashes, just that he can be more than an off-ball specialist with the right development. Keep in mind though, we're talking about a rookie, and who knows if he'll be an impact player on offense right away. The only guy on the roster who I'm confident truly balances high-end playmaking with a reliable three-point shot is Malik Monk, but that takes me back to the defensive concerns. If you need Monk on the court to make a trio of LaVine, DeRozan, and Sabonis work offensively, you're not going to get stops, and all that's to say this roster simply wasn't built to be versatile. They've got lots of offensive talent, lots of defensive talent, multiple shooters, multiple creators, but it's literally impossible to translate it all into one lineup as long as DeRozan and LaVine are on the court playing big minutes, which is probably why people label them Bulls 2.0. They've got a legit top 8 or 9 though, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're kinda good after getting Keegan Murray back. Between the shot making, rebounding, and pace of their offense, it feels like they have a pretty decent floor to fall back on. However, they've got some serious defensive woes and are one of the least versatile rotations in the league. If they lean all the way into the offense, I wouldn't be surprised to see them land in the top 7. But you've got to get your defensive guys on the court to not be the worst defense in the league, and I think it averages out to a perfectly average team. In a stacked West, that means falling a few games below 500, although I wouldn't be surprised to see them win 42 or 43 games. Come playoff time, this roster is built to get absolutely blitzed, which is why I think losing would leave them better off. In my opinion, Sacramento's front office is at a bit of a crossroads. On one hand, they're trying to cling on to relevancy, and I get it. The 2023 season was a ton of fun and brought the love of basketball back to the city. And if they want to remain somewhat competitive, what they're doing right now isn't an awful direction to go in. However, I'm thinking in terms of trying to eventually win a championship, and this installment of the roster has a hard cap with a low ceiling, especially when considering that they'll be relying on a 36 and 37-year-old for serious rotation minutes. For that reason, I think they'd be better off long-term using this season to focus on developing the young guys. I'd actually make the argument that their depth is pretty underrated. Keegan Murray's a proven impact player who just turned 25. Keon Ellis is a proven 3-and-D wing who's about to turn 26. Neat Clifford, Devin Carter, and Maxime Reynaud all have intriguing skill sets and all are below the age of 24. This isn't the Spurs or the Thunder, but there's a future here. The Kings just have to make a decision. Are they content with mediocrity, potential play-in appearances, and exciting moments throughout the course of an 82-game season? Or are they willing to blow up the current iteration of the roster, gather as many assets as possible, and try to hit big in a stacked 2026 draft?